Today, we're going to be looking at the top 10 most broken Agricola cards. Agricola is a game that has existed for a long time at this point, and there have been thousands of cards printed. So today, I'm going to look at the top 10 most broken Agricola cards, at least in my opinion. I have been around the block. I played with a lot of these cards personally, and there are a lot of really dumb cards in Agricola. There's a lot of really stupid things. A couple disclaimers about what I mean by broken. When I say broken, I mean cards that are both powerful and that like break the game of Agricola in some way. So like they're cards that just like do something that really shouldn't be allowed in Agricola, and cards that are also tend to be very good. I think all the cards on this list are cards that like should probably be banned when you're playing Agricola if you're playing with these cards. I also pulled from both the old sets and from the revised edition. I looked through sort of everything. If I missed something, let me know in the comments. And as always, if you like this video, do subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps out a lot. So with that, let's get into it. So I have a few honorable mentions for this list. So there are a lot of cards in Agricola. There's a lot of really broken cards. And so I have a couple honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is none other than Bobbin Table. Bobbin Table is a card that is an action space, and when you use that space, until the next harvest, for some reason this effect lasts for multiple turns, you can use action spaces even if they're occupied. The reason that this is an honorable mention, not in the top 10, is that it does cost you an action to be able to use this effect, but obviously it's a really powerful effect. Like, so the way that I've seen this card used a lot is that in like round 12 or round 13, like round 12 when like Family Growth or Plowsow flips, you can use this card, then you can Family Grow if it flips in 12, and then Family Grow again in round 13, because this lasts until the harvest. You can use this to jump to the Family Growth queue. The cost on this card, like normally for this effect, you have to like play an occupation, and typically that occupation only lets you use that effect like once or twice, and that's sort of like a fair, swing at this type of effect. This card allows you to do it as often as you want to, and just taking occupied action spaces is like very against the grain Agricola. That's what earns this card an honorable mention. It's a very like dumb effect to have in a game, very warping for the game. So our second honorable mention is the only card from the revised edition of Agricola that's on this list, and this is Chapel. Chapel has been remade. There was an old version of Chapel that removed your begging cards, but in the new edition, removing begging cards is like pretty dumb. There is a card that effectively does that, and that card is really, really good. That card didn't quite make this list, but that card's also really stupid and pretty broken as well. But this Chapel is dumb for a variety of reasons. So it costs a lot of resources. So 2 clay, 3 wood is a pretty substantial cost. But this card's worth 3 points by itself. And then it's an action space that when you use it, you get 3 points. But if someone else wants to use it, they have to give you a grain. So in some games, grain is typically pretty hard to get a lot of without like sowing it and then harvesting it. So this card is both, like when you play it, it's both a grain source because other people want to use this. A 3-point action is super duper dumb. And just like immediately other people are going to want to take that, right? Plowing a field is like a pretty good default action, and that's worth like 2 points. So this is 3 points anytime you use it. And if other people want to use it, they have to give you something that is worth points or food to you in grain, which is like, maybe this isn't the most powerful card of all time, but it is very powerful. And it's super dumb. It turns the game into like, hey, do you have enough grain to be able to use this to pay the person with the card a bunch of grain? I think the first time this got played in a game, like the person easily broke 60. So like, it's like so obviously a broken card. However, not quite as broken as the other top 10 cards on this list. But I have to honorable mention it. It's super dumb. The final honorable mention, in my opinion, is Chamberlain. This card basically says that at the start of round 11, you flip over the cards for rounds 12, 13, and 14, and you can use those cards in round 11 or round 12 or round 13 or round 14. It's a very dumb card. The reason that it's only an honorable mention, not in the top 10, is because like even though this effect is obviously very powerful, you get to Family Grow without room, you get to Plowsow like earlier than you're normally supposed to. Like both those are very powerful. It does open up the growth queue and open up Plowsow for other people in the game, and that is somewhat of a cost, and you have to use an action to play this card, which, as ridiculous as that sounds, that like, hey, you have to use an action to play like a card that has such a strong effect. There are some other cards in this list that they don't even really take any actions to do something really dumb. They actually generate actions and they generate dumbness. So this card has to be an honorable mention. It is like a card that is like classically always on every banned list. So this is an honorable mention. All right, so now we're getting into my top 10. And number 10 might actually be a little bit surprising to people. So my number 10 most broken card of all time is Autodidact. There are a lot of cards in Agricola that allow you to play occupations without taking actions and allow you to play them in mass. And I think this is the best version of that effect that I can think of. It just lets you play, at the start of each round, 1 occupation for 2 food. And it's just like, it's so good. Occupations tend to be cards that are just like really, really good. And typically, they're like worth a little bit more than an action, right? Typically, occupations, especially early on, are worth a little bit more than an action. But this card allows you to play them all really early at a very low cost. 2 food is like totally reasonable. And like if you just draft an occupation that gives you food when you play it, then this card effectively like it is generating food for you because you're playing occupations that give you food, and then you get to play all these other occupations that have stupid effects. Like add on to the fact that you could have things that say, okay, whenever you play an occupation, you get something. And typically those cards are balanced around the fact that occupations are pretty hard to play, a lot of, but this card lets you play all of them. So I think that this card, like this type of effect is like very, very good. These are some of the most fun cards to play with, are cards that let you dump your hand really fast. But it's so broken. It's just like so insane. I've seen this card do a lot of stupid stuff. I have played with this card a lot because we have allowed this in my sort of like personal format because it's such a fun card to play with, but it is very broken. It's a very good card. And these types of effects you have to be very careful of. And so like there's talk currently of banning Begging Student, which is a card that I think is pretty significantly worse than this, but in the current set, Begging Student plays too many occupations and is just like so good, and this type of effect is just too powerful. And number nine is a really interesting card. This is Beguine Courtyard. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And this card is super interesting. It looks kind of like a janky card that doesn't really seem doable, but when you see this card get played in like a really messed up way once, you can see that this card's broken. So the way that this card works is that when your house is shaped like a U, like it is in the picture, you get to move. This card is in play, you get to immediately move every single person that's still in your supply into your home. So effectively, if you start at 2 people, you have this card, you grow, or you effectively grow into every room in your house. So you get 3 family grows, and they can take actions at the current round. So effectively, as long as you can prioritize building rooms, and you can build 3 rooms really fast, then this card gives you 3 family growths really fast. Now, this card does have the downside that building 3 rooms is not super easy to do. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world. But if you get any cards that give you a room discount or like make it easy to build rooms, and you can power this out in like round 7 or something like that, when you play this card, you get 3 more actions. So like even though you immediately have to pay 10 food for your family or whatever, getting 3 extra actions is like so insane that like, you can play this in round 8 and then be on 5 family members in round 8, and then that's pretty much game over if that happens. So like this card is very clearly game breaking. Getting 3 family grows that are even better than family grows because you immediately get the actions just for building rooms that you want to do anyways is just too broken of an effect. I think that the first time I saw this card get like someone got 5 family members in round 8, and we were like, okay, we got to ban this card. This card's too dumb. So this card is very clearly broken, has a completely crazy effect that allows you to cheat family members, and that's why it's number 9 on this list. Number 8 is the classic Braggar. Braggar says at the end of the game, you receive 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 bonus points for having 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 improvements in front of you. So basically, every improvement after the 5th one gives you 2 bonus points, with the 5th one giving you a single bonus point. This card's just like broken because it gives you incidental bonus points without really a cost to it. I mean, typically in most games, you're going to be playing a lot of minor improvements anyways throughout the game, regardless of how you play the game. So at a minimum, this card is like 3 to 5 points. But it's pretty easy to play a couple of extra improvements throughout the game and get a couple of extra points for that. It just is like, it's too easy to get these points. 9 points is an insane amount of points to be printed on a card that's like this easy to fulfill. It gives you too high of like a point ceiling for free. A lot of other cards, like it's like, okay, if this occupation is like 3 points at the end of the game, for just you, that's pretty good. Like there's cards that are like that you're just like, okay, I'm happy to get 3 points for a card at the end of the game. This card can give you 9, which is completely insane. So like this card, for whatever reason, in the Bajou leagues, shouts to Bajou Meeple League, by the way, where I played for a while. This card's legal there for some reason, so I don't know why, but you can still play with this card on Bajou, even though some of the other like EIK cards might be banned. But yeah, this card is like so good. The new version of Braggar, which is revised to be harder to hit, is banned in the new set because it's still too powerful and it's still just too easy to do. At number 7, we have Taster. Taster, ignore the 2 on this. The original printing of the card has a 1 in it, and that's the version I'm going to grade this off of. So this says, whenever another player is a starting player, you can pay them 1 food at the start of the round and place your family member before them, and then after that, play continues as normal. I mean, this card is like this card might not be the absolute most powerful card because you do have to pay a food, but then you get to take whatever action you want. And like, unlike Chamberlain, where like you're basically taking the actions ahead of time to not deny them from other people, with this card you're like denying other people the best action on the board, which is also very powerful. So and having to pay only 1 food for that effect is just like so broken. So like one key fundamental part of Agricola is the fight over starting player and the battle for the starting player position. And this card just completely removes that tension and says, hey, I could just take whatever action I feel like whenever I want to, and you taking the starting player doesn't mean anything anymore. So it's just very broken. It's a very degenerate effect. No one wants to play with this card. No one wants to have this card played against you. And so I've never ever like really seen this card ever get played because of that. Number 6, we have a card that I've actually seen played quite a lot, and that's because these types of family growth effect cards were like not banned in the playgroup that I had played with for a long time, but like things that were pretty annoying like Taster were. This is Reed Hut. So Reed Hut has a pretty high cost. For a Reed and a Wood is a pretty steep cost. It's worth a point. But what this card does is that you get to place a family member token onto this card, and it lives on that card for the rest of the game, and you can use it to take actions, including the round that you play that card. And you have to feed it. But it's not worth any points when it lives in the Reed Hut, but you can grow it into your room later by taking a family growth action if you have room in your house. So effectively, this card is 4 Reed and a Wood for 1 point and a family growth. But the family growth, it only gives you 1 point instead of 3. That being said, this type of effect is still really powerful. Why is this type of effect so powerful? Well, firstly, you get to family growth skipping the room queue. And that's really important, right? Going through the process of building rooms and family growing is like a pretty slow process. And you have to fight with other people for it, right? So like with extra action spaces, there's less of a fight, but I'm not judging this around extra action spaces. But like normally you have to fight for things, but this card just says, okay, you immediately get the build room and family grow all combined in one, and you get to start taking actions immediately. So there's no tension around when does family grow flip. There's no tension around like, hey, do I get to build rooms? You just play this card and that's it. There's gonna be a couple more cards like this on the list that sort of violate the whole having to wait for growth queue and that whole tension around, okay, there's an opportunity cost to trying to rush growth immediately. Like, this card just bypasses all that. All you have to do is take 4 Reed. I've seen this card played as early as turn 3, I think. I think you can take, like, Reed Stone Food into 2 Reed into single Reed, and then, like, play this card in turn 3 or turn 4. If that happens, then it's very stupid. It's very dumb. If this card gets into play before round 5, it's really broken. It's a little hard to do that. 4 Reed is a pretty steep cost to get, but it can happen. If it does happen, then it's just super dumb. Taking extra actions in rounds 3 and 4 is like really, really powerful, and that'll be a common theme of a couple of the cards here. But this card is super powerful. The 4 Reed cost is what keeps it from being a little higher on the list. At number 5, we have Lover. Lover is basically an occupation. It costs 4 extra food, but when you play this card, you immediately get to family grow with that room. So this card is like, it's very, very powerful. And the reason is that you can play this card in like, I think you can play this card in round 2, right? So if you take 2 food, I guess in theory you can play it in round 1, but if you're at a table where you get free occupation in round 1, that's crazy. But yeah, in theory, you take 2 food in your first round, and then your second round, if you have 5 food, then you can play this on Oxbot and family grow with that room. And I think that's pretty game breaking. Like getting an extra family member in round 2 is just like, it's dumb. The downside of this card is that you will never be able to grow again until you build 2 more rooms. But you should have the advantage from having such an early family growth action to be like 3 family members in round 3 and 4. You're just going to take so many good actions on the board. Like typically in round 5, there's a ton of good actions on the board because in round like 3 and 4, people are like setting up to build rooms. They have to feed. Like when you use this card and you get a family growth action like round 2, you have so much extra time to do things. You're going to really just like overwhelm the rest of everyone at the table pretty fast. That being said, that is a real cost to this card, right? But obviously family growing before stage 2 is just super broken. I don't think this card is on every ban list, but it should be. So I've seen this card play like once and it was gross. Number 4, we have Caravan. This card was remade with a 3 food cost and is still like so dumb that it has to immediately be banned. It's so stupid. I talked a little bit about how there's this process in Agricola of like you have to build a room. And building a room is really slow, and it's pretty inefficient. Like, it's not worth very many points, right? So in order to build a room, you need 5 wood, which typically is like 2 wood actions. You need 2 reed, which is really hard to get in the early game. You have to take a build room action, and then you have to take family growth, right? Afterwards, that's sort of the goal. Well, this card gives you a room at the cost of, okay, it's not worth any points. But the main reason that you build a room, right, the room itself is not really worth that many points. The room is just an avenue for you to family grow, and the family member is what gets you all the points because you get all the efficiency from the actions. So getting the room for 3 wood, which 3 wood is a single action that you can typically get pretty easily. So getting a room for that growth and skipping that whole process is like so stupidly efficient and this card has the upside that you can, if other people are building rooms and trying to threaten growth, then you can always just starting player play this card and guarantee yourself a family growth when in the next round if given that family growth is available. So like it skips the growth queue that everyone else is doing. It is a room that skips that process. There's so many things about this card that are broken. Also shouts to Wood HUD extension, which didn't make it on this list. The reason that like Wind HUD extension isn't on this list is because Wind HUD extension, you still have to like go through that process of building the room. You just get to jump the growth queue, which is obviously very powerful. But this card has the added benefit that you get to jump the growth queue and you play a card that's a room, and it doesn't pass. It's just like so egregious. It's such an egregious card. So obviously, this card's very broken. This is only number 4 on the list, though. So I think there are 3 cards that are more broken than this one. So yeah, let's check those out. At number 3, I have Guest Worker. It's like kind of close between like this and like the other cards in this list. Like once you get to like top 5, you're just like, okay, these cards are like so stupid. Guest Worker is very similar to Reed Hut in that it gives you a family growth earlier on. This card, you have to have a room for it, but it's worth a victory point. You get a guest, and that guest effectively is a family member. And basically, you place this card as a family member, but for whatever reason, they add the effect to this card that this card, this guest that you have can use the most recent round card as if even if it's already been taken. So if you have this card, then, well, when Plowsow flips, you can use Plowsow on that turn because this card allows you to use that. Or when Family Growth that room flips, this card allows you to use that. Or say that you build like a 4th room really early and Family Growth flips late, then like you could use it then. Like for whatever reason, they tacked an effect of like using occupied action spaces onto a card that allows you to jump the growth queue, even though like you do have to build the room, and building the room is kind of costly. But this card gives you the family growth on a minor space. It lets you jump that process of fighting other people, and it lets you take occupied action spaces, which is super dumb. So you do have to like feed it and all that stuff, but like it's just super dumb. It's a super insane effect, and like obviously super broken to be able to do this. Once again, this is another card that you can get up really, really early. You can get up this card in like round 4 or even 3 if you're going really crazy. So yeah, it is really good and obviously broken. All right, so at number 2. And number 2, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people. Number 2 is this card called Icescape Sharpener. And the more the reason that I think I have this so high, I don't think this is the best card on this list by far, but it is like the most infuriating to like look at and think that someone designed this card without thinking about the ramifications of it. So this card says a very simple text, right? At the end of each harvest, you may pay 1/1/1 food to use an out-of-turn action space of your choice without placing a person. So let's analyze this. The first time I saw this card, I thought, okay, well, the end of a harvest, so like that's only once every harvest, and it's at the end of a harvest, so like you only get actions that are, not taken by other people because it's like at the end of a harvest. Well, the end of a harvest is at a weird time. Everybody has returned home. You feed for the harvest. And then with everybody at home, before you restock the board, that's when you get to use this card. So, for example, if in round 7, you say, hey, I have this extra room, and there's this fight for family growth and other people are family growing, you can use this card to just take a family growth action at the end of round 7. And then I believe the way that it works is that you get to use that family member in round 8 without having had to have fed it, because you have the family member in your house, it's the end of the harvest, but then you didn't feed it. There's some very weird rulings issues because of the timing of this. You can do stuff like family grow without room at the end of the last round of the game, because everybody's sitting at home, and then you get to use your ice scape sharpener to use an action, and none of the actions on the board are occupied because everyone's returned home already. So this card is like so egregious. So like for basically with this card in play, for a wooden food every single harvest, you get an extra free action that is an action that nobody else is occupying on the board, right? So say if there's like a big wood stack on the board, you can take that. Say that you want a plow field, you could do that. If you want a family growth of that room or plow sow in later rounds, you can do that. Like there's so much flexibility to this card. It effectively, it's like a family member that you don't have to feed, but only takes actions in the harvests. It's like so dumb that someone thought that this was a good timing for a card at the end of a harvest to take place at, and that like it gives you an extra action at every possible harvest that way. Like it's so dumb. Thinking about it blows my mind that this card got printed, and I think it's like very clear when you think about the ramifications of it. I've never played in a game where we played with this card correctly, because once I realized what the timing that it actually happens at, I think we banned the card immediately, because we realized, okay, this is so dumb, like that this happens when everybody is at home and you've already fed your family members, so it's just so dumb. I can't talk about this anymore. I'm moving on to number 1. Number 1 is like the ancestral recall of Agricola. I feel like this is like the Black Lotus of Agricola. This is Wet Nurse. Wet Nurse says whenever you build a room, you can grow your family by the number of rooms that you build, and it just costs 1 food per person. So basically, instead of having to fight through the family growth queue and like wait to grow or whatever, whenever you build a room, you could just pay a food to grow. And this card like compounds on itself and like how good it is. So like the first time you use this, you can use this in like rounds 3 through 5 to get a family growth. So like if you like rush rooms, you could get this up in round 3, similar to like Childless or something like that. You can get this up in round 3. Build your room, grow, pay a food for a family member, get a new family member that you have in round 4, which is pretty nuts. But then it even compounds further. So like most of these cards that are on this list, right, they give you a single family grow like really early on. That's good. But then this card, your next family grow, the next time you have the resources to build a room, when you build a room, you then get to grow your family again immediately. So like this card not only grows your family the first time and accelerates that, but then every time you want to grow after, you can accelerate your growth. And then so by the time that you're sort of done with that, you're going to be miles ahead of everyone else. So like the only way to counter this card is just like to prevent you from building rooms ever, which is really hard to do, right? It's really, really hard to do. There's so much wrong with this card. I really think that like there's a lot of cards in here from this EIK set, like and EIK, if you don't know, is the original Agricola set that was printed. There were a couple of mistakes here, and these are mistakes that like in the newer editions of Agricola have not really been repeated, although they did print an alternate version of this card that I think it costs like $1 to grow your family when you build a room, which is, to be fair, a much more substantial cost, but still, it's still scary to see that text printed on a card, knowing that this exists and knowing that this card is stupidly powerful. So it's something that, like, I think that the makers of Agricola, right, have sort of learned from this over the years, but like there are these cards that were printed originally that are just like so crazy that just have these effects. They're just so mind blowing, and so it's fun to look back at and analyze them. So that's my list: the top 10 most broken cards in Agricola. I think all these cards are like pretty universally banned. What is your personal opinion on your most broken card? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next